In the 80s and early 90s, Hulk Hogan was the WWF's biggest star. Hogan seemed to transcend the wrestling business as a whole, becoming a household name as he went beyond the normal popularity limitations that were placed on wrestling superstars. Hogan, at one point, arguably became bigger than wrestling itself. But how did Hogan reach these heights? Sure, we all know that Hulk Hogan headlined WrestleMania after WrestleMania during his quest to become the biggest megastar in the history of pro wrestling. But why Hogan? What did Hogan do before the WWF that granted him such superstardom? In this video, we will look into Hulk Hogan before his successful mid-80s tenure with the World Wrestling Federation in hopes of figuring out why Hulk Hogan became the star that he did. Before getting into the nitty-gritty of things here, I feel that I have to point out that the amount of conflicting information out there on Terry Bollea, especially in his early days, is truly staggering. From incorrect dates of early matches that just didn't happen, wrestling news reporters going back on information they once published, even Hulk himself has contradicted things he has said in the past depending on the information source, and that includes Hulk's own book. I've tried my best here to present the most accurate information possible on the early days of Terry Bollea, cross-referencing dates where I could and things like that. There is a possibility that some things have been incorrectly reported, but be aware that I've tried my absolute best to present here the most accurate details regarding Hulk Hogan in the 70s and early 80s. Terry Bollea was born on August 11th, 1953 in Augusta, Georgia. When he was 1 year old, his family moved to Port Tampa in Florida. The young Hulkster was a keen baseball player, pitching in Little League Baseball before an injury put an end to his baseball endeavours. Into his late teens, Hogan began watching professional wrestling, with Dusty Rhodes being his favourite superstar. He would go to the Tampa Sportatorium to see CWF cards while becoming enamoured by these larger-than-life superstars that he saw in the ring. When Hulk Hogan first laid eyes on superstar Billy Graham, he was awestruck, and in Hogan's book, the Hulkster said he wanted to match Graham's inhuman look. Hulk also played the bass guitar growing up, and he would get small bookings around southern Florida. He dropped out of college to try and pursue this dream of playing in a rock band, and in 1976, his band Ruckus became quite well known around the Tampa Bay region. Hogan and lead singer Anthony Crisello had been in a band named Coco before forming Ruckus. Around this time also, Hulk worked out at Hector's Gym in Tampa Bay, working hard to try to get that physique he saw in wrestling shows that the guys like superstar Billy Graham possessed. Jack and Jerry Briscoe visited a bar where Ruckus was playing, and the Briscoe brothers were impressed by the size of Hulk. The Briscoes asked Hogan if he would consider a career in professional wrestling, and of course Hulk was interested. He had been watching wrestling from the Florida region for a long time, and while Hulk was doing fairly well in the Florida music scene, a career in wrestling could be much more lucrative, and of course, it opened the doors to fame and everything that comes along with it. The Briscoes talked Hiro Matsuda into training Hogan. The Hulkster would quit Ruckus, and for a year, Hogan went through one of wrestling's most difficult training regimes. Hiro Matsuda's school was no walk in the park. There's a long-running story out there that Hiro Matsuda broke Hulk Hogan's leg on the first day of training, and to be honest, I wouldn't want to present that as an absolute fact. Jerry Briscoe said that it was a sprained ankle that Hogan trained on, eventually leading to a broken ankle. Hogan too, with all due respect, can embellish the truth on occasion, and wrestling myths like this seem to get more embellished as time goes on. It's certainly possible that it did happen, but Hogan has peers out there who have debunked the myth, so that's that out of the way. While Hogan was still training, Jack Briscoe paid a visit to one of Hiro's classes. where he told Hulk Hogan that he was scheduled to work a match 1 week later. It's been stated online and in interviews also that Hogan's first match was against Brian Blair in the CWF, but it wasn't. Hogan's first match was against Don Serrano for the CWF in John Carroll High School. The match took place on the 9th of August 1977. Brian Blair did give Hogan his first training match, but not his first professional wrestling match in front of a live audience. Hogan worked against Brian Blair 3 days after the Don Serrano match, also in front of paid customers. Hulk during this time in his career was known as the Super Destroyer. The Super Destroyer gimmick was one that was passed on to other superstars in the years that followed. So for example, Sergeant Slaughter was once the Super Destroyer Mark II in the AWA. Hogan wasn't the first Super Destroyer either, by the way. Canadian wrestler Don Jardine, who would go on to become the Spoiler, was the first to use the Super Destroyer name. Hogan used the gimmick during his time in Florida and gave up on the character when his time was up in the territory. By the end of his run here, he was already done with professional wrestling. Hulk felt that he could no longer continue on with Hiro Matsuda's demanding training regime, and perhaps getting into wrestling was a giant mistake on his part. Hulk worked his final CWF match in October of 1977 and didn't step back into a wrestling ring for around a year and a half. During this time, he began managing a private club in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and he also co-owned a gym. It seemed that Hogan's days in the ring were over before they really began. Enter Ed Leslie, Mr. Bootyman Brutus Beefcake himself. Leslie and Hogan were friends, and during this time period, Leslie began helping Hulk Hogan run his gym. Hogan and Beefcake would work out together, and over time, Beefcake's physique got so good that Hogan felt the pair could be a tag team in wrestling. I'm not joking, by the way, or maybe I am telling you guys an embellishment here. This is how the story went according to Hulk's book, and to be honest, us fans have no other real information in regards to Hogan's downtime here, so yeah, let's just run with it. Ed Leslie's physique saved the career of the Hulkster. Anyway, Hogan had decided to lace up the boots once again, and he would bring Ed Leslie with him for the journey, promising to get Ed's foot in the door and teach him everything he knows from his stint in the CWF and beyond. It was actually Billy Graham who got Hogan some work outside of Florida. The Hulkster was on his way to Alabama to begin working as Terry Boulder. Ed Leslie would be known as Ed Boulder, and together we had the Boulder Brothers. Before getting to Alabama and Southeast Championship Wrestling, Terry Boulder had a quick stop in Memphis where he teamed up with Jerry Lawler for 2 matches. Lawler and Boulder won both matches. Remarkably, Terry Boulder's very first match in Southeast Championship Wrestling was an NWA World Heavyweight title shot against Harley Race, a match that Hogan lost, but still, it's very noteworthy here that Hogan was given a shot at the NWA Championship in his first match in the territory. Likewise, his final 2 matches in the territory were also NWA Championship matches against Harley Race, winning both of these matches by disqualification. Hogan only spent around 2 months in Southeast, but he had a great win record here. Immediately following his time in Alabama, Hogan went back to Memphis on the promise of a much higher paycheck on a weekly basis. His first lot of matches here saw him team up with Ed Leslie as the duo got some early victories as the Boulder Brothers. It was also during this time in Memphis that Hulk Hogan got his Hulk name, thanks to appearing on a Memphis talk show where he sat beside Lou Ferrigno, the man who played the Incredible Hulk in the early TV shows, and the host of this talk show commented that Hogan was actually bigger than the Incredible Hulk. Back in the CWA, Terry Boulder then became Terry the Hulk Boulder. Terry Boulder remained in Memphis for only around 3 months, but the amount of matches Hogan got here in such a short period of time was really good. The Boulder Brothers then packed their bags to move into the next territory, Georgia Championship Wrestling, and a new territory meant a new name for the Hulkster and the Beefcake. Hogan became Sterling Golden, and Ed, he became Dizzy Golden. Don't ask. A notable and fun little fact here is that on the 20th of November in 1979, Sterling Golden got a victory over Bret Hart while in the Georgia territory, Hogan here being one of Bret's earliest opponents in the United States. Terry Funk has been credited as the man who introduced Vince McMahon Sr to Hulk Hogan, and it's been said that Vince Sr was very impressed by Hogan's physique, which by this point was way bigger than when he started back in Florida. It's been said also that Vince Sr gave Hulk the name Hulk Hogan as he wanted Hulk to use an Irish name. This is likely true, but just for the record, I'm from Northern Ireland and I don't know a single person with the surname Hogan, or the first name Hogan for that matter, but anyway, Hogan got 3 consecutive wins in Pennsylvania while working under the WWF banner here. It seems that Vince Sr was giving Hulk a tryout at first to see how well he would do. Hulk then went back to Georgia and worked as Sterling Golden once again, finishing up his commitments before starting with Vince McMahon Sr and the WWF on a full-time basis. Hogan had his first match in Madison Square Garden on the 17th of December, defeating Ted DiBiase in the process. Hogan's first WWF stint lasted around a year. He was a bad guy, and with manager Classy Freddie Blassie by his side, he worked against the likes of Tito Santana, Gorilla Monsoon and Jose Estrada while scoring win after win. Hogan also feuded with a babyface Andre the Giant, a notable match occurring between the two in August of 1980 at Shea Stadium. During this time also, Hogan split his time between the WWF and New Japan Pro Wrestling, going over to Japan to take on people like Antonio Inoki and Tatsumi Fujinami, while also tagging with Stan Hansen here in the tag leagues. Hogan would tour again with New Japan in May of 1981, and one of the more interesting matches happened on May 25th. On this date, Dusty Rhodes defeated Hulk Hogan via countout. Hogan would once again return to New Japan and have great success, but more on that later. Just to backtrack a little, Hulk's last matches with the WWF during this stint occurred in April of 1981. Hogan lost to Tony Atlas on the 18th, and about a week prior, Hogan lost a Texas Death Match to Andre the Giant. Hogan was then fired from the WWF due to his participation in the Rocky III movie. Hogan played the role of Thunderlips in the movie, something he felt would elevate his stock while also securing him a nice payday. Vince Sr, however, did not want Hogan to act in the movie. Hulk Hogan said the following on the Steve Austin podcast. The mindset back then wasn't like it is now. Like, we want Stone Cold to do his TV show, and we want Stone Cold to do the Expendables, and we want The Rock to do whatever. Back then, if you were a wrestler, you didn't do TV. You didn't go do a movie. If you were a wrestler, you were a wrestler. Vince Sr fired me for doing the movie because you weren't supposed to do movies or TV shows back then. So Hulk was out of a job, but really not for long. He briefly went back to Florida for a few weeks, winning every match he was booked in before joining Vern Gagne's AWA with Eddie Boulder by his side. I'd say that it was here in the AWA where Hogan truly became a star in the wrestling world, as much as Vern Gagne tried to stop it from happening. Vern liked pure pro wrestling, and he liked wrestlers who had great athletic pedigree, and this just really wasn't Hulk Hogan. Hogan was more about the showmanship, playing up to the crowd, big impact moves, that kind of thing. The thing was, the majority of the AWA's top stars were getting older, and here was Hulk Hogan, a name in New York, a younger guy who was making a name for himself also in movies and whatnot. You'd think that Vern would at least consider building the AWA around a young, upcoming star, but no, Vern Gagne was incredibly stubborn back then, much to his detriment. Hogan was initially booked as a bad guy in the AWA, but as the weeks went on, more fans would cheer for him. Hogan's babyface turn eventually happened in the summer of 1981. Rocky III was released in theatres the following year, and Hogan's popularity, within the wrestling world at least, exploded. Hogan was feuding with the Heenan family and AWA champion Nick Bockwinkel, and Vern had a golden opportunity to grab that crossover media attention that promoters dream of. but yet he was still hesitant to go all the way with Hogan and give him the AWA Championship. Hogan vs Bockwinkel done big business. It sold out arenas across the Midwest as people clamoured to see Hogan win the title. It was teased. He won the AWA title on 2 occasions, but the decisions were reversed both times. But in all the missed opportunities within the history of wrestling, this one here by Verne Gagne has to rank up there as one of the all-time greats. There's rumours out there that Verne would only give Hogan the belt if Hulk agreed to give him a cut of Hulk's Japanese touring money, but this can't be confirmed nor denied. Hulk said that he had to print his own t-shirts and merchandise because the AWA done a poor job of marketing their wrestlers. When Hogan got back after another tour of Japan, he learned that Verne was now printing and selling his own Hulk Hogan t-shirts. Verne apparently refused to give Hogan a cut on merchandise sales, something that infuriated Hogan, and really, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Hogan also said on the same day this argument went down that both he and Verne got into a scuffle, and this pretty much ended the Hulk Hogan and the AWA relationship. While it does all sound like doom and gloom here, Hogan's time in the AWA was insanely important to the man's rise in popularity. While Hogan didn't win the AWA Championship, at least not officially, he did make people tune into AWA shows, he sold out arenas, and he became one of the hottest acts in wrestling. So we should also mention here that in 1983, while Hogan was still with the AWA, the Hulkster became the first IWGP tournament winner and the first holder of an early version of the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. In the tournament finals, he defeated the legendary Antonio Inoki to win the belt. Keep in mind, this isn't the same IWGP Heavyweight Championship that is defended today, but still, a nice feather in Hogan's cap here, and a great example of how over he was in Japan. In 1982 and 1983, Hulk Hogan and Antonio Inoki were partners in the MSG Tag League that took place in Japan, going on to win the match series 2 times in a row. So that's pretty much it then. After the falling out with Verne Gagne in November of 1983, Hogan went to Japan for a few weeks before coming back to the United States in December of 93. By this time, the WWF was under the control of Vince McMahon Sr, a man who saw great potential in Hulk Hogan. While Vince Sr was more old school and traditional with wrestling as a whole, Vince Jr simply was not as traditional. Vince Jr didn't believe in unwritten rules in wrestling. He had a relentless desire to turn the WWF from a regional promotion to a national and worldwide powerhouse, and he saw the marketability within Hulk Hogan. Vince McMahon Jr saw Hulk Hogan as the WWF's leading attraction, the face of not only his company, but the face of American professional wrestling. Hulk came back to the WWF, and 4 matches later, he was the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. Hogan's successful WWF run and the rise of Hulkamania though will be covered in a future video.